A three-day meeting of the country's premiers got underway today, and the first item on the agenda was a discussion with Indigenous groups. The premiers are gathering at Deerhurst Resort in Ontario's cottage country, and trade and tariffs are expected to be the main topic, particularly when they meet on Tuesday with Prime Minister Mark Carney. Ontario Premier Doug Ford spoke with the press before the meeting to discuss the steel and aluminum tariffs that the U.S. has imposed on Canada.
Well, what I believe in when the steel tariffs or aluminum tariffs, we start onshoring everything. We don't make I-beams here in Ontario, but we have more cranes than their top 10 cities combined that are carrying those I-beams. And that's billions of dollars they're going to lose with aluminum cans, the beer cans, the soda cans. We're bringing companies on board that we're going to manufacture it here. So they don't have to face the 25% tariff on the way down, 25% tariff on the way back. We're encouraging all provinces and territories. Start buying Canadian-made vehicles. Start buying Canadian-made everything. That will hurt them more than anything at all. We're their number one customer. We do more trade. We do more trade with them, we buy more products, I should say, off the U.S. than Japan, China, Korea, UK, and France combined. So we are an economic powerhouse, and we don't have to take a backseat to anyone.
First on the agenda is an important conversation with Indigenous leaders, including representatives from the Assembly of First Nations, the Métis National Council, and the Native Women's Association of Canada. The meeting comes as Indigenous communities have expressed concerns with federal and provincial laws meant to fast-track major infrastructure projects. Our correspondent Wyatt Sharpe joins us for more on the Premier's meeting.
Canada's premiers gathered in Muskoka today for the first of 3 days of meetings at the annual Council of the Federation. The session took place at Deerhurst Resort in Huntsville, hosted by Ontario Premier Doug Ford. All 13 provincial and territorial leaders were in attendance, and the day started with a closed-door roundtable between premiers and national Indigenous leaders. Representatives from the Assembly of First Nations, Métis National Council, and the Native Women's Association of Canada joined the discussion. Their focus, expanding Indigenous involvement in infrastructure, energy development, and economic reconciliation efforts. Premiers say it's about making sure Indigenous communities are not just consulted, but rather directly involved in major projects that pass through their territories. After the morning session, attention turned to interprovincial trade, with U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods expected to take effect as early as August 1st. Premiers voiced serious concern. The proposed 35% tariffs could hit key sectors like aluminum, steel, lumber, and agriculture, impacting thousands of jobs across the country. Ontario's Doug Ford told reporters the provinces are standing united and are ready to respond. He said protecting Canadian workers and industries is a shared priority and that the country can't afford to take a wait-and-see approach from Washington. British Columbia Premier David Eby raised softwood lumber as a top concern. He warned that BC's forestry sector is still recovering from past disputes and must be included in any future federal response. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe called the gathering a step forward for Western provinces and emphasized the importance of interprovincial trade routes and energy corridors. He said provinces need to be ready to move quickly on national infrastructure if access to the U.S. becomes more restricted. While trade dominated the agenda, the premiers also reviewed efforts to remove interprovincial trade barriers that include streamlining provincial licensing, improving labor mobility, and speeding up approvals for major development projects. The work builds on commitments made under the One Canadian Economy initiative launched earlier this year. Public safety and emergency preparedness were also discussed. With wildfire season underway in several parts of the country, premiers flagged the need for stronger coordination on emergency response and resource sharing. Bail reform and efforts to address organized crime were also briefly raised during the afternoon session. Tomorrow, Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to join the group. He met earlier in the day with a bipartisan group of U.S. senators in Ottawa. Premiers say they are looking for a clear federal plan on how to respond to U.S. tariffs and how to keep Canadian companies competitive in the face of growing trade pressure. Day one wrapped up with a private dinner hosted by Premier Doug Ford. Sources say the goal was to give premiers space to speak more candidly ahead of heavier negotiations in the coming days. Over the next 2 days, premiers are expected to tackle a range of domestic priorities from housing and healthcare to clean energy and infrastructure. But most agree that trade, economic resilience, and Indigenous partnerships will remain the top themes as the summit continues. For now, Wyatt Sharpe, the News Forum.